Well, he hasn't yet been sworn into office, but Egypt's first democratically elected president has begun forming his government. Muslim Brotherhood endorsed Mohamed Morsi has officially moved into the presidential office and has begun consultations on his cabinet. What does this mean to Israel and its peace treaty with Egypt? For more on this and the claim that that Jerusalem will actually be Egypt's new capital, let's get live to Jerusalem now. Yaakov Katz, he's a military and defense analyst for the Jerusalem Post, and he joins us over the phone. Yaakov, I read your article with interest this morning because you indicate that over the short term, you don't see a lot of risk. Why?
I don't think anything will change. I think that Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood and whatever new government he establishes will have far greater fish to fry, or whatever you prefer. In other words, they have major economic problems. They have major welfare, particularly the economy, and that's something they're going to have to get to work at right away. There are over 80 million people whose mouths he needs to worry about feeding on a daily basis. Picking a fight with Israel is not going to be at the top of his list of priorities.
And indeed, as I look at this, Yaakov, Morsi was actually kind of taking away some of the powers over the military. Is that a plus or a minus?
Well, I think from Israel's perspective, it's definitely a plus. Israel, while there have been a lot of ups and downs in Israel's political ties, even with the previous government in Egypt under Hosni Mubarak, the Israeli military and defense establishment has always enjoyed very close ties with the Egyptian military. And I think that Israel would hope that that will be something that will continue. I would venture to say that what we're looking at possibly in Egypt is a similar model to Turkey, where you have an Islamic party that's come to power, but the military to some extent remains secular. Now we're seeing, unfortunately, in Turkey, Erdogan cracking down on the military, but there was still that slight division of power. I think Israel would like to see that model retain itself in Egypt.
Okay, is Israel right now concerned that Egypt will make Jerusalem its capital as opposed to Cairo?
I mean, we've heard of a lot of people over the years who have called to turn Jerusalem into their capital, whether it's the Iranians who have an Al-Quds Day, right, that's Arabic for Jerusalem Day, or it's Hamas or Hezbollah, or so now it's the Muslim Brotherhood. I don't think that Jerusalem, where I'm speaking to you from right now, is at risk of anytime soon of becoming Iran's capital, Lebanon's capital, or Egypt's capital for that matter.
Yeah, good point. Nonetheless, I mean, what's it been, 30 years since the Yom Kippur War? What is Israel, and 30 years of peace generally, what is Israel doing to prepare for any problems it might have with Egypt?
Well, that's correct. It's been almost 40 years since the Yom Kippur War,
right.
But it's been about 33 years since Israel made peace with Egypt. And I think that's an important point that you referred to, is the fact that for 40 years Israel hasn't fought a war with Egypt. For 33 years it's had peace with Egypt. And it's basically, as military, it's lived in a state of luxury where it's only had to focus on the northern front, particularly Lebanon, where Hezbollah is, in Syria, and maybe the faraway threat of Iran or Iraq, depending who has been the biggest threat for Israel over the past couple of decades. But really, it hasn't had to worry about the South, and depending on developments that could take place there and which direction Morsi takes his new government and what he does with the peace treaty with Israel, the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, might have to start to rebuild certain capabilities that for the past 33 years since the peace treaty went into effect, it hasn't had to worry about. That's also a major point of concern today for Israel.
Why a point of concern? Because of the cost of doing that buildup?
Well, I mean, the cost is definitely a major issue, right? We're looking at one IDF general recently said to me that it would mean basically doubling the defense budget. Israel is a country that's been trying to trim its defense spending in, I would say, the past 10 to 15 years. And the thought of having to double it, the thought of having to increase the enlistment, and there already is a compulsory service in Israel, the thought of having to establish new divisions, new fighter jet squadrons, the thought of having to call up the reserves more often, it would have major economic, social, cultural ramifications for Israel. And I think that Israel has been trying to move away in its 64 years of existence from conflict, and this could be drawing it closer. It doesn't want to have to go in that direction.
Okay, Yaakov, so then Israel can also prepare by getting other allies, if you will, or people that have leverage over Egypt. And I'm particularly thinking of the United States. What would Israel ask of the United States?
Look, Israel will look to the United States, I think, to retain a position of power or a position of influence over Egypt. Now, the natural way that that can be done is through economic aid that the United States has the ability to offer Egypt. I think that Israel will hope that the U.S. continues to play a role in Egypt, and also the European Union, or even Canada for that matter. Israel has very good ties with Canada, as well as with Europe. But to look to those countries, those Western countries that can continue to play a role in Egypt, and that will have the Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood to enjoy the benefit of that Western aid, will have to remain moderate to some extent in his stance and in their position vis-a-vis Israel, and when it comes to keeping the peace treaty and making sure that it retains itself. So Israel will hope that those countries continue to play that role. If unfortunately that doesn't happen, then I think that we need to keep in mind Israel's ability to influence a country of 80 million people is very limited.
Yaakov, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
That's a military and defense analyst for the Jerusalem Post, Yaakov Katz, joining us live over the phone from Jerusalem.